morning, good afternoon, and also good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Warm welcome to you to the first lesson sessions of SOBA 2022. And first of all, I would like to welcome our speakers, Professor Cramer and Professor Handayani, who are willing to attend this summer course and share their knowledge. Good evening, Prof. Lori and Prof. Handayani. I see Prof. Lori have been already here, and we also have Prof. Handayani in the Zoom. Yeah, and thank you very much for both of you for attending the summer course. We are really appreciate it. And before we listening to the course, let me introduce myself. My name is Dia Fitria Widiningsih from Agricultural Socioeconomics, Faculty of Agriculture. You can call me Fitri, but today I'm not alone because I have a partner who will lead the discussions, Mr. Najmu. Good morning, Mr. Najmu.
Good morning, Ms. Fitri. Good morning.
How are you?
Great, thank you.
Yes, great.
Okay.
And well, today we have two special speakers. Yeah, you know, both of them are in USA. Yes, coincidentally. And our first speakers will be Professor Handayani, and she is helping already with us right now. She is a professor in soil science sustainability in Murray State University in USA, and she is a master's in soil science, and she graduated from University of Kentucky for her doctorate degree. Prof. Handayani is also conducting research about climate smart agriculture. It is like the SOBA main theme. So it is very great opportunity to have you here, Prof. Iin. Are you still mute?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, hello, Prof.
Thank
Iin.
you.
How are you, Prof. Iin?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's great.
What time, Prof. Iin?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I just visit Indonesia.
Oh, really?
Oh, right now you are in Indonesia?
Yeah, this is my second day in Indonesia.
Oh, second day. Okay, so good
I'm
morning.
in Bandung. I'm in Bandung. Yeah.
Yeah, we hope that we will see you soon in Yogyakarta.
Amen. Yes.
For the next SOBA. Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Iin. And our second speaker will be Professor Cramer. She is a professor of sociology in the School of Public Policy at Oregon State University. Oregon State University is a place where Bu Arini studied a long time ago. Yeah, it is interesting that Prof. Lori focuses on socioecology. So, participants, for you who are interested in studying community resilience and also rural natural resource-based regions, it is a very good time for you to have a great discussions with her. Yeah. And in this sessions begins with the lectures given by Prof. Handayani and then continued with the materials from Professor Cramer. And each speaker will deliver lectures for a maximum 30 minutes. And then we will have a discussions for around 45 minutes. And before that, don't forget to fill out the attendance link in the chat box. And if you have any questions during the lectures, please don't hesitate to write it down in the chat box, or you can write it down on the attendance link. We have already provided a special box for you to give your questions, well, for both for Prof. Iin and also for Professor Lori. Well, Prof. Iin,
yes.
It's our honor to give the stage for you.
Okay, so I like to share screen for my presentation. So can I start?
Yes,
okay.
You can start.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Can you see? This moment.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see that.
That's it. Okay, is that better now? It is my pleasure to be here with you all good morning, good afternoon, good night. So I don't know the time anymore, but this is very nice, and it's an honor for me to be here to share about climate smart agriculture topics. And I wish that we have more time, because this material is kind of lot, but I try my best to make it 30 minutes. Thank you. So I'm Handayani, and I'm a professor at Murray State University in Kentucky, USA. So before I start my lecture, I just like to let you know one quote from Bill Gates, that climate change is a terrible problem and it absolutely needs to be solved, and it deserves to be a huge priority. As said by Pak Swadi and also by Pak Made, that food system is very important for all of us. We cannot live without food system. Therefore, we have to accommodate, or we have to solve the problem of climate crisis in order to secure our food system. So what is climate smart agriculture? Actually, climate smart agriculture is kind of action that related to sustainably increase productivity and has to have a concept of resilience, of adaptation, and of course, whatever the practices in agriculture that we use, it has to reduce or remove greenhouse gas, and then also enhance the achievement of national food security. And there are 3 principles in climate change, climate smart agriculture, like, of course, the final goal will be sustainable agriculture production, and then we have mitigation and adaptation. And actually, climate smart agriculture is continuation of my lecture last year, which is smart agriculture. So when you see in the left side, in the bottom, you see conventional agriculture, and then after that, we go to precision agriculture as the basis of smart agriculture, and then smart agriculture, which is kind of more broad compared to just precision agriculture. And then after that, more specific, which is climate smart agriculture. And then whether you like it or not like it, actually, whatever we do in CSA is always go to the global goals. And there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goals that we need to have related to CSA. The first one is for zero hunger, and then good health and well-being, and also for sustainable cities and communities. Of course, number 13 for climate action, number 15 for life on land, and number 17 is partnership for the goals, because we need community to make the CSA happen. So just like Pak Made said, the collective is very important in this case. We cannot do individually. And then why we need climate smart agriculture? So we have like challenges. First one is human population. As we have more population, especially in 2050, which is about 9.7 billion, we need about 50% to 60% of food. And of course, it will be different from place to place, from country to country. So, but in average, it's about 50 to 60%. We need to provide food for people all over the world. And then challenge number 2 is greenhouse gases and limited natural resources. So actually, in the future, 66% of people will live in the cities by 2050. As you know, in the city, we cannot provide food supplies enough because most of the land are for building. In fact, we need 50% increase in food production. And then there are drop in agricultural workers, about 32% in developed countries and also in developing countries, which is, this is not a good sign, especially will be more after the pandemic. So we still need food with minimum agricultural workers. And then also we need more mouth, 3 billion to feed by 2050. And then whatever activity we do for non-food, it will emit 74% of greenhouse gases. And then food will be 26%, which is food related to agriculture. And you can see in the right side, different kind of number, how many percent from different activity, like from crops for human food, livestock and fish farms. So there are more greenhouse gases with those activity. Like in Indonesia, if we grow rice, then more greenhouse gases like methane and nitrous oxide. And then in United States, we grow, like in my place, grow corn and soybean. So the CO2 will be more higher in the atmosphere compared to N2O and methane. And challenges number 3 is land degradation and low crop yield. So this is different. The previous one is how the agriculture or how the land impact on the climate change. But right now, actually, how the climate change impact on the land degradation. So the climate change will impact on the soil quality and also the water quality and quantity, food quality, and biodiversity. And in agriculture with different technology, it will have, affected by climate change. And based on the data, that, for example, Brazil will reduce the rice production up to 12% in rice. And then Southeast Asia, more than 12%, decreasing in rice. And then in America, wheat will be decreased due to the climate change up to more than 10%. So you can see this is like very significant impact of the climate change on our agricultural production. So it's kind of confusing maybe for you, because when we talk about climate change, it's like the agriculture itself is the center. Like the agriculture contributes to climate change, but agriculture can help the climate change also. So in this case, we need climate smart agriculture. So for example, here, agriculture contribute to climate change. We have that greenhouse gases on the left side. And then how the climate change will impact agriculture, like global warming, different kind of season of precipitation, like what's happened in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, and then extreme temperature, so in America, it's kind of the summer is so hot, yeah, and then longer summer or shorter summer. So that is the thing that's happening. And then both of them become challenges to us between reduction of greenhouse gases and fruit production to help the population that increase. So in this case, when we talk about climate smart agriculture, we have to include both of them, reduction of greenhouse gases, and we still increase food production. So what is the key of CSA? Actually, the key is the landscape. And our topic today is about climate smart agriculture and society. And Professor Cramer will talk about climate smart agriculture and society. So you can see the landscape and the society is almost the same, because it's kind of impact each other. And we can see here, this one is climate variation. And number 1, in landscape, we have to have adaptation service for people. So the landscape can deal with the climate change and also can still produce the crop production. And also whatever happened in number 1 will have impact on the society here. And then number 2, the landscape has to be kind of adapted to the agriculture and ecosystem, because in landscape, we have soil, we have ecosystem. And then number 2 will have impact directly to landscape. And then number 3 is mitigation service. We have to deal with the carbon, the methane, and the nitrous oxide or other greenhouse gases. And you can see here, when we talk about landscape, there are 2 things. One, beside society, of course, one thing is the soil. There are different kind of soil order, like from the young soil I call less developed to well-developed, which is kind of old soil, like a red soil in Indonesia or in Southeast Asia, that is considered old soil. And then the young soil like anti-salt, for example, different kind of soil will have different ability to capture the CO2 or to retain the greenhouse gases. And then different landscape will have different ecosystem. You can see here, for example, the green one is tropical forest, the red one is tundra, and then the blue one is chaparral. So all of this area has different ecosystem. So both soil and the ecosystem itself will have potential or the ability to capture, for example, for carbon sequestration, which is the higher carbon sequestration, the better the ability of landscape to mitigate greenhouse gases. So when we talk about landscape, one of the most important that we talk about today is agricultural land. And agricultural land is not just for food production. There are other functions for that, like ecosystem service and clean energy. And we will focus on ecosystem service, which is a kind of increasing carbon sequestration, for example, and also provide good quality and quantity of water. So in this case, when we talk about landscape, land management becomes something that is important here. And when we talk about land management, it means the land management practices can be traditional, can be non-traditional, depend on the society, depend on the community. In this case, for example, here conventional tillage, and this one is climate smart agriculture, which is more diverse management system. This one is kind of mono management here. We can see here more greenhouse gases emitted from the land, but here more carbon sequestration happening in this land. And what kind of practices here? Reduce tillage, biochar, land restoration, and use crop rotation, organic amendments, nutrient management. So this is kind of common practices everywhere actually. It just depends on what kind of level of technology that the farmers have. And then the implementation, of course, farmers will not work by themselves. There are other kind of supporting institution. And also, this is the basic of science technology that will help to process better land management to help with climate change conditions. For example, we have soil monitoring networks, remote sensing. This is a part of the smart agriculture. This is the study guess, the example. Okay, for example, this is using cover crop. Based on the research, using cover crop will increase soil organic carbon up to 6%. Soil organic matter is one example indicator of carbon sequestration, which is the more carbon sequestration in the soil, it means better ability of soil to mitigate greenhouse gases. So this one is considered very simple, easy, breezy to do research. And then if we use conservation tillage, only increase 5%. But if we use biochar, it increased up to 39%. And I know in Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia, biochar is also commonly used for farmers to improve the crop production as well as to improve carbon sequestration. And then the most important, especially for developing country, don't forget about indigenous knowledge. It doesn't mean that modern agricultural knowledge is not good, but we need to include the people or the society when doing the climate smart agriculture. So we cannot just adopt technology from, for example, from USA or from other and then drop it in Indonesia or other Southeast Asia countries and then do it. No. So we have to consider indigenous knowledge. For example, like Pak Swadi and Pak Made said that One of them is agroforestry. It's very, very common in Southeast Asia and in tropical countries. And this one is the example of coffee garden here. She used the chips from the coffee as a source of carbon. This one, actually, this process will improve carbon sequestration. And this one is transgenic farming landscape from Japan called Satoyama. And this is very good because it's contain a mosaic of mixed forest, rice field, grassland, and reservoir for irrigation. In this case, farmers not doing farming like upland farming system, but also rice, of course, and also fish farming. So it's very sustainable. So not just climate smart agriculture, but also toward sustainability in agriculture. And in the right side, you can see different kind of traditional agricultural system that commonly used in Southeast Asia or in common tropical areas. And this one maybe in case you are confused in different kind of term of indigenous knowledge. So in Google, you can see that there are different kind of term related to indigenous knowledge, which is traditional knowledge, local knowledge, or traditional ecological knowledge. And this one is very good for community development when we like to apply CSA in the village. And then remember, our soil will not function well to mitigate greenhouse gases if not healthy. So we have to consider our soil to be healthy in order to properly function well. Unfortunately, this topic is so broad. Hopefully next time, SOBA will give opportunity to me to explain more about soil health, okay? But right now I will summarize that in this case, when we talk about soil health, actually we talk about soil quality, just like a doctor, medical doctor, you know, check the human health, but it is, we check the health of the soil. And you know, if our soil is not healthy, then our food will not healthy. And global warming will happen, okay? And there are three things here. We have indicator selection, so we have numerical selection, and we have interpretation. So hopefully next time, if there's a more opportunity, I will explain more. In this case, we have to do monitoring short-term and long-term. This is the example. So this is human health. You have medical doctor, we have symptom, diagnosis, and indicator. And then for soil quality, we have extension researcher like us, we have a scientist, or we have lecturer, or we have whoever that has interest on soil health. So in this case, we have symptom, we have diagnosis and indicator. And remember, when we talk about indicator, there are indicator that's sensitive and there are indicator that not sensitive. Just like human being, the indicator of sensitive like blood sugar, cholesterol, and maybe blood pressure. But for soil, for example, texture is not sensitive enough, because when you measure soil texture this month, next month is still the same. But if you measure soil organic matter, before harvesting, you measure, and then after harvesting, you measure, may be different. And then soil acidity, that is more variability in the field. You measure in in the morning, maybe in the afternoon, sometimes it's different. Okay, so that's it. And this one is just the example of common soil indicator and soil function. A long time ago, when I still in bachelor degree in UGM, long time ago. So we only concern about soil fertility, soil physical properties separately. But right now is not like that anymore. This one is new 21st century of soil health. So we have to combine or integrate soil physical properties, chemical properties, and biological properties based on function, just like our body. If we have high blood pressure, we have like dizzy and nausea, something like that. This is the same. Soil, if has, for example, low aggregate stability, then your soil will be kind of sensitive to erosion. And then, for example, if the soil respiration is low, then your soil is kind of lack of good microorganisms, so it's not good. And then, for example, if you have a low P And K, so it means your soil cannot support well the fertility or the need of phosphorus and potassium for the plants. So maybe your plants, it will get sick very easy. So this indicator has to relate to the function of the soil, okay? Not just like for crop yield. This is unfortunately, when we talk about soil quality, we don't have indicator of crop yield. So that's why the acceptance from the farmers right now in advanced country is kind of less compared to the soil fertility. And also the standard is only based on the reference field instead of we have numbers. However, there are standards for several properties like soil book density. If your book density is more than 1.5, that's not good. If your soil organic matter less than 0.3 or less than 1, that is not good. So it's kind of the standard is not based on the soil. So the farmers still need the standard from the crop yield, because especially in this era, we need to have crop production that matching with the soil quality or health. That still need research on this one. So this is just a simple experiment. If you like to learn about soil health, it's very easy. You can teach even elementary school, yeah. So, or just for fun to see which management practice that consider healthy. So you like to know, oh, if I do this one, is that healthy? So this is how the farmers kind of put the cotton underwear here, new one, and then they bury it, you know, in the topsoil. And then after a while, this is no-till, this is conventional tillage. So if you have no-till, this is the decomposition is very fast, so it's degrading. But this one, look at that, is still good. It means this one is more healthy. Okay, and then this one, you can see this one, the more degradation here, it means the soil is more healthy. So this is indicator of soil health that is very easy and affordable to do the experiment with a lot of land management practices that you like to measure. For example, you have community that you need to help to know about healthy soil, then you can use this method as many as possible because it's cheap and good, and you can use like any fabric material that easy to decompose. And then how to start for the CSA, just like previous pembukaan before opening remarks, that we need to have community, so climate smart village. So we need a village to start this program. So we have to have climate smart technology, and we need to have climate information service. We need to maintain what we have, it is local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and also we need to have plans, not just like short term, but this is kind of long term. And then we have carbon smart, water smart, yield smart, and other things that we can use, and we use mobile phone application. So in this case, we have to make sure that our farmers kind of know about the technology, how to use it, and of smart agriculture that will be in the CSA, like we use soil sensor. This is important with the basic of precision agriculture, spatial variability, and remote sensing farm. This is a must, and harvest sensor and other agricultural equipment that need for our farm. Of course, it depends on the financial situation of that village, is little by little, but at least we can start from the land management program, and then we can measure using soil organic carbon or the soil health experiment. So that is the cheap one, and then little by little we have to monitor how is the improvement every year. So in this case, this is my suggestion. For agriculture education in higher level, we need climate science, not just agrometeorology, okay, but climate science that kind of integrate the adaptation and resilience, the greenhouse gases reduction, and productivity. So integrated of this one, and has the, I know UGM has the greenhouse, has the field research experiment station. So UGM can use those lab and experiment station to do this climate science and agriculture, and use this component, and this component, this is the indicator. This one is my expertise. So use this one. And then, of course, this is from agronomy. This one will be from environmental science, soil science, and this one is from other, like even from fish, faculty of fish department there, or other from engineering. So this one is integrated climate science in agriculture, is kind of integrated science here. And then it will involve soil health, nutrient use efficiency, precision agriculture, biopower, biofuels, and infrastructure that support all of this. And then in conclusion, action is needed by implementing adaptive land management system to achieve the food security and sustainable development by reduce the greenhouse gas footprint. However, uncertainty has to be reduced by improving precision agriculture, smart farming system, and I hope that all agriculture institution or agriculture department in higher education have class called precision agriculture or smart farming system that incorporate this kind of component, so all students, all alumni will have understanding about climate smart agriculture. Thank you, and I am ready for answering the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Iin Handayani. Yeah, we agree that talking about climate smart agriculture, community or collective actions is needed, right? And in addition to the technology, soil, and food health, of course. And still, Prof. Iin said that the key is the landscape. Yeah, it's the landscape. We need human and also the soil itself. Wow, it's very interesting, Prof. Iin. Thank you very much. And now, before going to the next lectures, let me politely remind you that you have to fill out the attendance link. If you have any questions, please write it down on the attendance link or a chat box. Yeah, in the chat box here. Okay, and now it is the time for Professor Laurie Cramer to deliver her lectures. Professor Laurie, the time is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Well, good morning, afternoon, and evening. I'm in the United States right now in the state of Oregon. So it is in the evening and it's warm, but probably not as warm as it is in Indonesia. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yes, please.
Well, thank you all for being here today, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this program. I was really excited when Dr. Utami asked me to present. I've known her for a long time, and I really respect the work that she is doing, and I'm excited about this conference and everything that you'll all be learning. Just briefly, I am a professor in sociology in the School of Public Policy at Oregon State University. And I've been a professor here for about 30 years, and I do work on rural communities and natural resource communities and related to community resilience and adaptation. And so a lot of my work covers both agriculture and other types of natural resource communities. And I think there's quite a bit of thread that goes through these studies that I want to talk a little bit about today and share with you. And I think it really fits nicely with the presentation that we just heard about climate smart agriculture as well. So let me go ahead and begin. I want to begin by talking a little bit about climate change vulnerability. As noted by the IPCC, climate change is affecting nature, people's lives and infrastructure everywhere, okay? From rural to urban to remote coastal mountains, we're all affected. And its dangerous and pervasive impacts are increasingly evident in every region of the world. And these impacts can be hindering efforts to meet basic human needs, as we just learned about, and they threaten sustainable development across the globe. So to mitigate climate change vulnerability, it's increasingly important to develop resilience and adaptive capacity. Of course, when we go to define resilience and adaptive capacity, there are multiple definitions out there ranging from the ecological to the social. And although there are many definitions of community resilience, resilience of human systems is the ability of communities to cope and to recover, to maintain essential system functions. And when we're dealing with issues of climate change, it becomes, again, even more important to understand how can communities adapt. And we even have concepts such as adaptation, which is a little bit different than resilience, but also similar. And so adaptation refers to decisions and actions taken to maintain that capacity to deal with changes in the system. Again, while maintaining basic structure and function. This could be referred to ecological systems as well as social systems. But as a sociologist, as a social scientist, I focus mostly on the social systems. And then we have adaptation, but then the capacity to adapt. How does that reflected in communities? And a lot of it has to deal with preconditions. What is happening in a community, a place that allows them to be able to adapt? What are the infrastructure capacities? What are the social capacities? And in the work that I do and have done over the years, social capital comes out as a dominant variable. So what exists within a community, a place, whether that's a fishing community, farming community, mining community, what systems exist in place that allow adaptation to occur when a shock comes in, whether that shock is an economic shock, a geophysical shock like an earthquake or a tsunami, or climate change, which could be slow and sea level rise and be occurring over time. Okay. So what's in place? What do we need to understand about communities' ability to adapt? And then how can we better help those places support their needs and their weaknesses? And so what are they missing and how can we identify that? So that's a lot of what I do and the types of research that I cover. I just wanted to comment a little bit on the interconnectedness of social systems. We had some great visuals in the previous presentations, and I really appreciated those because I'm a visual learner. I like to see pictures and connections. And so I've tried to incorporate that as well. But what we see here is, again, kind of the interconnectedness of all of our systems, from climate change having an effect on the ecosystem, including the soils that we just learned about, but also other services, ecosystem services that provide us, clean water, clean air types of things. But that climate change is going to affect a community's ability to be resilient. And so how resilient a community can be, their ability to respond, their ability to adapt, their ability to reorganize, again, is important to understand because not all places are the same. Even in Oregon, we have different responses based on different community existing structures. And that's going to affect adaptation. So your ability as a community to be resilient will affect how well you're able to adapt. And that can be at the individual level, how adaptable is an individual farmer, an individual fisherman, an individual household, but also ecologically, how capable or adaptable are you ecologically? And this is going to also vary from the local to the global. That adaptation strategies that might work at a local level might not work at a larger scale or at a global level. And in part, that has to deal with the issues of vulnerability. That not, again, every place is equal, even within a geographical space, there's going to be difference. And the ability economically to be able to adapt. To be able to adopt climate smart agriculture could depend on a community or a household's economic opportunities. Do they have financial capital, financial resources to be able to invest? Do they want to invest? What are some of the barriers to investing in new technology or in adaptation strategies? And then certainly there's going to be geographic vulnerability, again, depending on the type of place. And a lot of what I focus on is this bottom one as well, the equity issues, the social equity issues, dealing with issues of environmental justice and social justice, recognizing that adaptation strategies that might work for one group, perhaps they could disadvantage another group. And we need to be cognizant or need to be aware of when that might happen so that we can mitigate those potential adaptation strategies so that we can help everyone and not leave some people behind. What I'd like to do now is just comment a little bit more on these connections. Okay. And in the work that I do, I focus a lot on local communities. I don't really do a lot of work on a regional or global scale. I look at what's happening in local communities and then how can we understand and gain from that experience and generalize to other places. Now we know with a lot of climate change issues, we have great economic models, we have great climate models, and those are really important, okay? And you're going to be learning a lot more about this as this course goes on over the next couple of weeks. You're going to be learning a lot about how the agricultural systems play out. But while global leaders and scientists debate the future of climate change and look at these models, the impacts themselves, the impact of that climate change is happening at a local level. Okay, it's experienced on the farm, in people's backyards. And so I think it's really important then to critically assess resilience and adaptive capacity at the local level. Now, it's not to say that other research that looks at regional and global is not important. Absolutely, it's all important. We need to have those big picture ideas. We need to have that large scale examination going on. But we also need to understand what's happening on the ground in communities. And that's where a lot of my research again focuses, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This presentation or the rest of the presentation is going to synthesize a couple of different projects that I've been involved in to help understand what's happening in communities. Okay. What do we need to understand as scientists? What do we need to understand as decision makers to be able to help communities adapt to climate change? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about wildfire studies that I've been involved in, flooding events, and then also fishing, dealing with issues in ocean coastal changes. And then I'll come back to a little bit to agriculture. But I wanted to highlight that, again, the themes that emerge cross-cut all of these types of communities. Okay. And while the focus for your course and much of what you're going to be learning about is agriculture, there's also lessons that we can learn from other types of community studies about what's going on in adaptation. So that's where I'm headed. So come along for the ride, I hope. The first study that I want to talk about is one that I did with, again, another former student, where we are working on forestry communities. And these were a couple of rural communities that are located in the mountains of Oregon. And these rural communities depend on forestry for their livelihoods, for their economic livelihoods. The communities emerged because they were wood products. Okay? And so that's their livelihood. And we wanted to find out about perceptions of climate change and global warming in these places, because we know climate change models have shown that we can expect an increase in frequency of wildfires and intensity of wildfires. And certainly we've seen that in the United States. And so we wanted to understand, okay, where are people at with these ideas in these communities? Are they understanding what's going on? And are they understanding that they can make changes to improve or to mitigate some of the problems? And so we had two communities in the forest project, and we asked household members through surveys Do you believe in climate change? Do you think it's happening? Do you think global warming is happening? And are you worried about these impacts? And what we found is that people were concerned about climate change, but they didn't call it climate change. So they weren't worried about climate change. They viewed that as something that's way out there. What they were concerned about were fires and more fires, and they didn't want to have more fires. And they wanted to be able to continue to work in their forestry occupations. And so the risks that they talk about less about climate change. They don't use the language. And this is really important to understand when you're communicating with community members or you're doing extension work, is you really have to kind of listen is how they frame the issue, because you really want to meet them where they're at in understanding issues of climate change. And so in this community, the issues that were important weren't labeled. They weren't called climate change or global warming. They were more about, hey, I want to keep my job. What do I need to do to keep my job in the woods? Okay. So adaptation efforts then for these communities really need to focus on, and this is coming from the data, on understanding fire risk management. And the thing is, if you're doing fire risk management, you are going to be working on climate change mitigation, but that's not what they want to hear. They want to hear about fire management. Okay. So in other words, we really need to think about, again, where people are coming from and where their interests are and how they're framing the issue. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to communicate well and be able to share the science and to share what's happening in terms of climate change adaptations. We also did in this particular study a social network analysis where we asked people about their networks of information. Where do they get their information? What levels of trust? Do you trust scientists? Do you trust government? Do you trust the media? And we found again in these smaller communities that they were not worried about national news, global research. They were interested in what's happening in their communities. So they didn't watch national news. They didn't learn about what else was going on in the world. They listened to their neighbor. They listened to their local extension agent or their local forestry agent person who they felt understood who they were and how things played out. Okay. So again, we found that local knowledge and networking is extremely important. Another study was looking at climate change attitudes and beliefs after a flooding event in Colorado. So we were fortunate enough in this study, this was in the state of Colorado, Boulder County. We looked at 4 communities in this county. And we had data about climate change attitudes from a previous survey. And so a survey before the flooding event. So we were actually able to compare attitudes before a flood and after a flood, which is pretty rare to do. And we also use other secondary data to find out, okay, how are people feeling about climate change in this area? And then we also did a variety of interviews. And once again, community members were framing the issue around local events, around local impacts. In this particular area, there is a higher degree of education, and there is already a higher degree of acceptance of climate change and global warming. But what happened with this flooding event, it was a major flooding event. People died. It took out bridges. It took out homes, major landslides. Okay. That heightened their awareness about climate change impacts. Before it was something that they agreed with was happening, they knew about, but they really weren't interested in doing much about because they didn't see the relevance locally. And now that they see it locally, they're more aware and they're more interested in doing something about it. Now, another interesting an issue that came out of this study was this role of social capital. Remember, I talked about how those connections are important in dealing with adaptation. Well, in these surveys, social capital emerged as an important variable. People talked about the connections they had with people, how people were helping each other out, neighbors were helping, the people were volunteering, they were taking people in, they were bringing others food. There was a great deal of neighborliness. But when it came down to then adapting afterwards, okay, so what do we do now that we want to rebuild? It was interesting that, and this is why I have a minus sign kind of on this sign on the slide here, is there were positives, but then it got to be a little bit negative because people started talking about what do we really want our community to be? And then the community leaders or the people who had power wanted it to be a more affluent area, which meant people that were low income to begin with were not given the same resources. So for example, a mobile home community that was part of this, a mobile home park where low income people lived was washed out by the flood. But after the flood, when they were rebuilding and adapting, some of the people did not want to have low income housing back in their communities. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic when you're looking at adaptation is again to think about this equity issue and think about how do we help communities understand that their decisions might not equally affect all social groups and how can they consider that going forward. And this study really highlighted that issue of marginality and marginalization. So in sum for this study, their beliefs in general remained the same because they had already had a high level of support for climate change research and beliefs, but their awareness about it increased because of those direct impacts. And so they were more willing to do adaptation efforts. So the more people are connected or have been affected by climate change impacts, they're probably more likely to be willing to do adaptation strategies. Okay, the third case study or set of projects I want to talk about is some work that I've been doing on the Oregon coast. And this has to deal with fishing issues and coastal climate change issues. And this is a project where we've done oral histories with fishing families up and down the Oregon coast. And we were asking them about resilience in the industry. And in particular, we were asking about the graying of the fleet. The graying of the fleet is the fact that we have an industry, a fishing industry, where fishermen are getting older and younger people aren't coming in anymore. So the average age is going up. So it's graying, getting grayer in the process. And so we were interested in this graying of the fleet phenomenon happening along the coast of Oregon. And so we wanted to ask people, fishermen, about this issue. And through these interviews, these oral histories, we started learning about the connections between climate change impacts and the graying of the fleet. So the climate change impacts that people were talking about were issues around warmer water, okay, algae blooms emerging in the oceans, even species and stock fluctuations, and the fact that species could drift. So now you have to go further to catch your fish, okay? Or they could be going up the coast or out or deeper. And in order to be able to continue to fish, you're going to be able to have to adapt, but that costs money. And again, that could be a barrier then to entry, especially when you have a younger group that doesn't have that financial capital. Okay, so we started to see, again, through our interviews, we weren't looking for climate change in this study, but it's everywhere, right? And so it emerged here about graying as well. And so we have interviewees talking about this barrier, this difficulty to getting into the business because it's going to cost more if climate change is happening and you have to travel farther. And if you have to be away from your family more to be able to do your work, that's going to be a burden on the family. And so those travel times. And as climate change happens, there could be more infrastructure damage to the ports. Okay, where you bring in your fish, you might not be able to bring them in your port, so you have to go to a different port. Or the waves could be more difficult because of sea level rise. It could be more difficult to get your boat out beyond to where you need to fish. So these barriers that they were talking about, even though they started talking again about financial issues and changes, we're really talking about climate change. But if we had gone in and said, hey, is climate change affecting graying? They wouldn't have made that direct connections. It's these indirect connections. And so again, it's learning from people about where they're at. I have in here again as on this last line, the role of traditional and local knowledge. We've been hearing about it quite a bit this evening already. And it's hugely important when we talk about other types of adaptation strategies in communities. And in this study, because we have the fishermen aging out, aging and leaving, and nobody coming into that, to fishing, or not as much, it's not as many young people, that's going to affect the knowledge about adapting to change. You know, how did they change, or how did they adapt years ago? What knowledge do those fishermen have that they could be sharing that will go away? Okay. And so we lose that intergenerational knowledge. We lose that traditional ecological knowledge about fisheries, as well as that cultural knowledge about a way of life in fishing. And so I think we can see that it's not just a fishing issue, but we can easily transcend or carry this forward into agricultural communities. And I'm working on with another faculty member in our College of Agriculture, looking at comparing the aging of farmers to fishermen, and to see how that is also affecting the industry and community resilience. Because for me as a sociologist, it's not just about the industry and the economy, it's about what does that mean for a community? Okay? What does that mean for a community to be resilient and to stay a community? Okay? So those are the kinds of connections to be thinking about. So again, this affects resiliency of the fishing community going forward. So let me just synthesize a little bit. I'm not sure where I'm at on time, but if I'm going over, you can ask me questions in a little bit. But across these studies, you know, what I'm finding, and my colleagues and I are finding, is this recognition that local climate change impacts are happening, even though participants and community members might not label it or call it that. They recognize change is happening. And so if we want them to consider and adopt new technologies and new ways of doing farming, agriculture, fishing, forestry, we need to understand how they are interpreting these impacts. Are they, and where are they getting that information from, so we can help understand their sources of information. The importance of social capital. Even though that one community in the flooding story, or the flooding research, had some negative about the social capital, overwhelmingly research around the world and all sorts of natural resources has found that the role of social capital can have a positive effect. That the more people are connected, the more networks they have, the more information sharing that's available, the more opportunities there are for adaptation. So generally, adaptation is a good strategy, and social capital can support that. But we do need to be cognizant, we need to recognize that there are some groups that are going to be more vulnerable than others. And we need to keep that in mind, so that we as researchers, as scientists, as community members, don't unintentionally marginalize groups of people when we're trying to do our science, or introduce our new ideas or our new technologies. So there's lots of opportunities then for mitigation, adaptation, resilience. Again, these concepts have very overlapping definitions, and you could dive into the literature and look at all the technical terms, but it's really, how do we help communities build capacity and to recognize what they do have and how to use that knowledge, as we were just learning about, okay? That they may have the existing knowledge and just don't know it, because they haven't seen how it can work in other different contexts. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to be able to help communities do that. And that local level approaches, as I was mentioning, even though in the examples that I've laid out with wildfire, floods, and fishing, absolutely apply to agriculture as well, and agricultural communities. So again, we find many ways that communities adapt to changes, and they continually demonstrate cultural and community resilience. and we need to be listening for that. And that for me, even though as a social scientist, I'm not, this isn't the only way that social scientists look at it. This is the way that I do my work, is at the community level. Because that's where adaptation for me, I see it occurring. And that's where specific social, cultural, and economic conditions are related to those local risks and opportunities. And that by addressing resilience to these local risks, we can ultimately strengthen resiliency and adaptive capacity to broader climate change impacts and adaptation strategies. So thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Laurie Cramer, for it's very awesome. Thank you, Prof. Laurie, because much new information about the climate change case to understand. Yeah, if I can highlight, the key is social systems, right? So it's about the interconnections among the climate change, resilience, adaptations, and also vulnerability. Yeah. And well, in this discussion sessions, I will be excited to invite Pak Najmul to help me to lead the discussions. And by the way, we have already collected the challenging questions from our participants today. So Pak Najmul, please, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fitri. Yeah, this time is question. I divide two sessions. The first session is by direct question, by raise hand, and then the second session is from attendance link that I've collected. So we start the first session. I would invite to all participants to ask directly to Prof. Iin and Prof. Laurie Cramer. Okay, the first one we have Mbak Nadila. Okay. Please, Nadila, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Najmul. Is it my voice clear?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, Prof. Iin, and good evening, Prof. Laurie. I am Nadila Puspa Arumwijanarko from Universitas Gadjah Mada. I would like to ask Prof. Laurie. So resilience is actually topic for my thesis. I still write on it, and is about agricultural sector resilience in the middle of natural disasters. So I use all of the natural disasters that we have, and it's only in ASEAN. So one of the variables, actually, I use agricultural workers. And when I analyze it, it's resulting that agricultural workers can decrease the risk of natural disaster hazard, or in the other words, I can say that agricultural workers can increase the resilience of agricultural sectors. So I have a question that is it agricultural workers can increase agricultural workers can increase the resilience because these workers have more knowledge about climate change, maybe, and adaptation or mitigation on natural disasters. Thank you, Prof. Laurie, and thank you, Dr. Najmul.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Nadila. Okay, I think Prof. Laurie can answer directly Mbak Nadila question. Please.
Yes, thank you for that question. I had a little trouble hearing you, so let me just repeat and make sure that I'm answering the question correctly. But does local knowledge or local farmers' knowledge help in understanding or being able to adapt to resilience related to natural disasters? That's kind of, yeah. I think that is, I think it can, but it's not an automatic, it's not a given. I think it depends on the human capital skills. What are the skills that the person or the group of farmers has that could be transferable? If somebody is very narrowly focused in their skills, then their skills might not be transferable to another sector or to another type of agricultural work. So I think depending on the type of disaster, depending on whether it's an acute disaster like an earthquake, a volcano, or tsunami, versus a chronic type of disaster, which is something that happens over time, like sea level rise, then there's going to be different timing of adaptation, whether it's going to be really quickly that you need to adapt versus over time. Okay, and so I think there's not a yes or no answer, but I think it really depends on the capital, the type of disaster, and what are the skills needed. You know, sometimes it's when I look at communities, it might not be an individual person or farmer type of skill. It might be somebody who's a farmer, but all of a sudden becomes a community leader, because there's leadership skills that are needed to be able to adapt to this and to be able to make that change, or to help people see options. And so there's going to be different types of skills that might not be related to being a farmer or a fisherman. Does that kind of get at your question a little bit? And maybe Lynn has comments as well.
Mbak Nadila, more question?
Is it really clear? Thank you, Prof. Lori, for the answer.
Thank you, Mbak Nadila, for the question, and Prof. Lori. And then the other, please raise hand. Okay, Mbak Vita. Okay, we have Mbak Vita. You can ask to who, please?
Okay. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning, Prof. Iin, and good evening, Prof. Lori. So I would like to propose a question to Prof. Iin. So for my research thesis, I'm planning to build soybean maize intercropping in agroforestry system, and I would like to do a research about nitrogen optimization. Regarding this, I would like to ask about how the parent materials affect the nitrogen emission, and what is the differences between well-developed soil and old soil in capturing greenhouse gases? Thank you.
Okay, Iin, please. About soybean.
Thank you, Mbak Beta, for the question. Well, that's interesting research plan. So, okay, I have question first. Have you started doing the research or still planning?
I'm now proposing my research proposal to my.
Okay, good. Very good. Very good. So it's still planning. Okay, good.
Yes.
So if you like to study about nitrogen efficiency, right?
Yes.
Efficiency. It's kind of hard if you choose different parent material as your subject of interest, because it's kind of too deep, too deep. But you can use, like when you say old soil or young soil order, that's better. Okay. So when I say old soil, it's mean like, okay, in Indonesia, like red soil, when the color, so like ultisol, oxysol, that is kind of, or latosol, sometimes, with old classification, that is old soil. So usually the physical appearance is kind of reddish. And then the young soil is antisol, even though sometimes the color also not so red, but is light, young soil. Well, andosol, andisol or andosol, that's also young soil because volcanic soil. So maybe you can use, for example, if you like two different soil types, choose the one that good soil, the other one is bad soil. Okay, and then the other one is in between, whatever you like. Okay, so but don't use different parent material, just young, old, or in between. Okay, and then when you choose the nitrogen efficiency, you have to choose, because nitrogen cycle is very broad and it's not cheap to do. Yeah, so if you like to do have a little bit, except if your project for thesis is funded. Okay, but if this is you fund by yourself, then I suggest you maybe you measure carbon sequestration, which is related to climate smart agriculture. So what kind of practices in different area with different soil, that's as a treatment, and then you measure soil organic carbon. That is easy and it's cheap, I think. And then you measure for nitrogen. If you still have interest in nitrogen, then it's depend of nitrogen you like to measure. For example, nitrates, okay? So if your soil has more nitrate, it means usually is kind of good because nitrate is more available for plants, right? Compared to ammonium. But you have to know nitrate is very easy to leach, okay? But easy to measure. And then you can measure total nitrogen also, but total nitrogen is kind of very rough number. So it's kind of, sometimes the difference is not so significant if you measure total nitrogen. You can measure ratio ammonium first, over nitrates, yes. Okay? Or if your lab has equipment to measure ammonium, nitrous oxide, that will be good. Or soil respiration. So how much carbon dioxide go to the atmosphere, you can measure actually with titration method, just the cheaper one, or there is some lab that measure that one. I know IPB has lab to measure that one. So there are a lot of opportunity, and then you measure young soil to old soil to young soil, and different practices. And maybe if you like to incorporate the traditional agriculture system and non-traditional ecosystem, that's good. This is kind of for, are you bachelor degree or master?
Master degree.
Oh, that is perfect. Yeah, you can ask me later on. I give email address to the committee. So if you like to ask me, welcome to email me. Okay, but this is wonderful idea, and your research, your data will be publishable internationally if you do properly. Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Good luck. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. Vita, more question? Or Okay, there's one more. There, Mbak Aisyah Puspasari, and then after this, I will going to the question from attendance link. Okay, please, Miss Aisyah.
Okay, thank you for the chance. I am Aisyah Puspa, and I have a question for Prof. Iin and Prof. Lori. So for Prof. Iin, should we combine some climate smart agriculture practices such as cover crop, conservation tillage, biochar, and climate information service, and etc., and how to make a wide landscape to be able to apply climate smart agriculture? And then for Professor Lori, is it possible for climate change adaptation to traditional knowledge so that farmers do not lose their traditional knowledge? In example, weather forecasting by looking at the nature. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Aisyah. First, for Prof. Lori, I think. Okay, then Prof. Iin.
Okay,
please.
Yes, thank you for the question. And I think it was about the role of traditional knowledge and agriculture and climate change. And I think sometimes we do a disservice to traditional knowledge and local knowledge about what they already are doing. And we make sometimes as outsiders, we make assumptions about their practices that could be incorrect, that they could already be doing very sustainable and climate friendly practices. And so I think a lot of it is to listen and to find out what are they doing already, and then how can we bring in new ideas, perhaps slowly, okay? And how can we blend what they are doing so that we don't lose that knowledge? We don't necessarily want to be losing that important information, that important part of people's culture and a part of their way of life. And so how can we do that in a way that come in with ideas, but also complement? And part of being able to do that is getting local people involved in the process, getting involved in learning about climate adaptation and strategies, and then listening and learning about what they prefer to do and how it would fit with their cultural practices and their way of life and what they want to keep as part of that culture, and trying to find a way so it doesn't become a dichotomy of either doing it one way or the other, that it can become a blended kind of process. But part of that, again, means we as scientists have to recognize the value of local knowledge and the value of these systems, even if we don't agree with them. It matters to the people involved. And if we want people to think and about what we have to offer, then we also have to think about what they have to offer and to bring into the process.
Thank you. Miss Aisha, more question? No?
No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Prof. Iin, please.
Yeah. Okay, Mbak Aisha, would you please repeat the first question?
Yes. So, can we combine some climate smart agriculture practices, such as like you mentioned before, cover crop, conservation tillage, and then biochar, and also combine it by a climate information service? That is the first question.
Thank you. Well, actually, whatever the practices that you mentioned is a part of the climate smart agriculture, because it's kind of the way of adaptation. Okay, how farmers or farmers community adapt to the climate change using climate smart agriculture. So actually, climate smart agriculture like approaches. Okay, so whatever the cover cropping, intercropping, agroforestry, and then crop rotation, that's a part of climate smart agriculture. So I think in Indonesia is easier because we all adapt the local knowledge. So it's kind of easy. My experience working in Sumatra with local people in Taman Nasional Kerinci Sebelat. Yeah, the local people over there really love the knowledge, whatever from the parents, the grandparents, and then we as a scientist have to adapt, like what they want. So instead of what I want, is what they want. So it's like a chef, like a chef in the restaurant, like, okay, what do you want me to help you? And then we go there. So this is how the way we approach to the community. Okay, and then for example, if they have wetland, and we know that wetland cannot be used for agriculture, right? Yeah, I mean, in theory. So we have to kind of what you call like pendampingan, facilitator, facilitator, help them to understand that, well, if you lose your forest or mangrove, and it will happen, maybe tsunami, will, kind of something natural disaster. So we try to help, make sure that we help them to adjust how the way they do agriculture, kind of little bit further from the wetland area. And the wetland area will be for the mangrove. So this is happened during the tsunami, pasca tsunami in Aceh. So we try to adapt with different local knowledge, in agriculture to help them to practice the climate smart agriculture. Actually, our farmers already do that. It just, it's kind of a new term, I guess, for all of us as scientists. But most of them, the local people, already did that.
Yeah. Okay. So, Prof. Iin, sorry to interrupt. I would like to confirmation conference in the case in Indonesia about that because we have agricultural extensions workers in Indonesia who help farmers. So actually, their role is not just they should help the farmers not only to adopt the technology or the practice, but also to resilience in adaptations like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully all the extension people, already got training in climate smart agriculture. Yeah, and especially how to use the smart farming system. That's the one that I think is the hardest part for us, in developing country. In United States, smart farming is everywhere because we have more land but less people, less labor. But in Indonesia, because we still have a lot of people, and well, the technology is not cheap, so that's why. But I think I'm optimistic that in the future we will do that one, because right now I see in news that a lot of farmers, because it's millennial farmers, okay, or generation farmers, they have to use that technology, and then combine with, of course, the son of the daughter of all farmers. Okay, and you, young generation, both of you, example of the young generation that will help the farmers to practice the climate smart agriculture. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the motivation, Prof. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Okay, next, thank you, Mbak Aisyah, for the question, and Prof. Iin and Prof. Lori. And then we're going to the question I've collected from the attendance link. I've choose 3 questions for Prof. Iin Handayani and 3 questions for Lori Cramer. Okay, wait, I share screen for the question. Okay. First, for Prof. Iin Handayani, there are 3 questions. First question from Celine Joy Firai, Philippines. Yeah, how climate smart agriculture can affect the way of living of people and the environment. What are the results that we can see if we continue to use smart agriculture on a daily basis? How can we reverse the effect or lessen the effect of climate change on agriculture? Okay, one by one or 3 questions directly, Prof. Iin? Okay. The second question, how can we relate soil organic carbon with the application of chemical fertilizers? Soil organic carbon will increase or decrease with the application of chemical fertilizer. Is biochar production and use in agriculture economically feasible? If not, how can we make it more affordable? Okay, this is from Noman Ahmad from Pakistan. Okay, and then the last one for Prof. Iin is from Dina Friska Karamina, Indonesia. Talking about climate change and society, I believe society plays a big role in fighting climate change. However, it's been still difficult to promoting sustainable life that could save the earth. Do you have any effective acts or idea in how can we promote sustainable life to fight climate change for society? Okay, please.
So, number 1, right?
Yeah,
okay.
right.
Okay. So, how climate smart agriculture can affect the way of living people and the environment? What are the results? Oh, well, of course. Actually, this one, like I shared with you before, that whatever we do, mostly in Indonesia, well, especially in the rural area, we already practice that, like, for example, agroforestry, and then intercropping system, and also using cover crops, not let the land or the soil kind of no plants. So this is kind of a way of smart agriculture. Is it the one that we don't have in the poor area? Is we don't have a way to monitor with a number, you know, and we are scientists, like numbers, like if the previous before practicing, you know, practicing CSA, the number is 1, and then after that become 3, you know, we like to have number. So this is kind of the job of the scientists, okay, or extension service, to teach the farmers how to measure the difference. For example, using the underwear example, you know, this is the easy one, you know, this is like the cheap, easy, even little kid can do that, you know, just put that for a month, and then after then what's happened? If broken, it means it's good soil, because healthy soil is also indicator of how wonderful is the agricultural practices related to decomposition. Okay, and then also soil scientists help the measurement of organic matter. And how to measure organic matter? We don't have to bring the soil into the lab if we don't have the laboratorium, for example, that close to that area. We can use soil color. You know, soil color is even with using ice or using what you call the Munsell chart, so soil color, Munsell chart color, and then you can see if getting reddish, it means the soil is not healthy. If darker, it's good. Okay, so you can tell, for example, if you go to the village and then see the soil is so orange because in front of the houses of the people there, they usually do not plant anything, let the soil just empty because they like to just clean, and that is not healthy. So maybe start to make sure that they grow something in their pekarangan. Okay, so that's it. Pekarangan is like in front of the houses, the land. Yeah, because Celine Joy is from Philippines. So I think almost the same. Yeah. And then how can we reverse the effect of climate change on agriculture? Well, we just have to give example, because this is a part of the community work. When we talk about climate smart agriculture, just like Professor Cramer said, is community work. It's not one by one. So we have to have to facilitate them with a team, a team of students, team of scientists, team of researchers. So we help each other, and this is not short term. We have to kind of, several months or 1 year or even 5 years. Yeah. So I think it's answering all right.
Okay, right.
Dr. Najmul, and then this is second one. How can we relate soil carbon with application of carbon? And then soil organic matter will increase the application. Okay. So usually if we use chemical fertilizer, it will increase the soil organic carbon, usually. But it depends on what kind of chemical fertilizer also. Okay. So that's why I'm sorry, the battery is low. Maklum, we have okay, I'm good now. Okay. Okay. So and then so usually it's depend on, for example, if you use chemical fertilizer like phosphorus, potassium, based on research, it will increase the soil organic carbon too. And soil organic carbon will increase or decrease with the application of, yes, this is already answering. Is biochar production and use in agriculture economically feasible? It depends on, it depends on what kind of biochar that you make. If this one is from waste, okay, for example, my colleagues in Padang, Universitas Andalas, she use kind of from rice, rice husks, and also from woods, that kind of waste wood, like not really wood, big wood, just branches that people do not use anymore. They make biochar using traditional way, just use kind of metal drum. It's very cheap and usually it's just kind of not used for anything, and they make biochar and the result is good. Yeah, but I don't know in Pakistan. Yeah. Okay. So, and then number 3, right?
3, the last one. Yeah.
Okay. Talking about climate change and society belief in sustainability. Okay. Yeah. So this is era digital, right? So one thing, we have to do 2 things. Okay. The first thing, then we have to give example, not just talking. Like me. When I'm in Kentucky, I'm not just talking, because if I'm just talking, my student will not believe me. So I have to give example. We have program in my university, Arboretum. Okay, we have community garden. We have apiary. We have agroforestry. We have crop, monocrop. Well, not crop rotation, but it's cropping like corn and soybean and wheat. Okay, and then I have to show how we practice climate smart agriculture using the smart agriculture and also using the traditional way, because we have also community garden that we use traditional way, and then we have just small garden in different neighborhood. Okay, that is kind of traditional. And then after that, we post in the blog and post in the Instagram, social media, TikTok. Yeah, that's good. So this is how the way we promote CSA. So I hope UGM, okay, and all the participants will do that. And this one is 95 participants, right? And from different countries, and start doing that, use the digital to promote what you do. And then next time, hopefully next year we meet again and we compare notes.
Okay.
Wow. So we move with the real actions, right?
Yes.
Not
just talking. Yeah.
So,
Just theory and talking.
Yeah. So from field to the platform.
Yeah.
That's the title.
Great.
Okay. So
yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Iin. And the next, we have 3 questions for Prof. Lori Cramer. Okay. I will read. The first one, what are some examples of commonalities in non-adaptation strategies and mitigation in the local communities? It's from Erika Jane, Pasamba, Philippines. And then we have also from Philippines, from Edwin T. Oh, I don't know how to in our desire to build a decarbonized society, do you see a strong correlation with the form of government or leadership strategies employed around the world in boosting community resilience to climate change? And what is the primary role of the generation of young generation in creating a more resilient community and help growing population in agriculture? And then the third question is from Gideon Ishimwe, Rwanda. This is from Rwanda. Okay, the question is, as we can see from the slide, climate change is a global concern, as there is no limit in atmosphere. However, when our leaders sat down and established some climate policies, some parts of the world choose to put these policies into practice, while others choose to keep these policies in theory. Okay, and the effect was felt by all. Whether you choose to practice them or not, I'd like to know what your recommendations are for these parties, whether they practice climate policy or those who don't. Okay, Prof. Lori, please.
Okay, great questions, very thoughtful. I appreciate that. So what are some examples of commonalities in known adaptation strategies and mitigations? Well, in terms of some of the commonalities, it involves, again, looking at what local resources you have to begin with, and then where are the weaknesses. So oftentimes they call it a SWOT analysis. You look for your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and then your threats to success. And so communities can help identify what do we already have in place? What are our strengths? You know, is it human capital? Is it education? Is it economic? Do we have land capital? You know, where are our resources? And then what are our weaknesses? You know, maybe we don't have a lot of financial capital. Maybe we don't have a lot of land that is available. You know, so whatever those weaknesses are, so that you can get an assessment of what are your opportunities. And then you can say as a community or as a neighborhood or as a cooperative of growers, these are our strengths. These are what we have going on. Here's where our weaknesses are. And if we wanted to adopt some of the climate change or the climate smart agriculture, what do we already have in place? What do we need? And do we know where to go to get it? So do we have a local extension agent who we trust? You know, what are those networks of resources? And that kind of gets into the social network part that I was talking about with some of the social capital, is what are some of the connections that may exist kind of at the local level, okay, and also beyond. Do people have connections outside to bridge that capital that could exist elsewhere and to be able to take advantage of those sources and resources? So those communities that are able to adapt more quickly, have stronger knowledge about what their existing resources are, and especially in terms of financial and social capital, and are able to then utilize those connections within the community or between communities or villages to be able to adapt. So I would say that those are some of the commonalities.
Yeah. Okay, great. But financial and social capital, right? Yeah. Then next question from Edwin. Yeah.
A strong correlation.
Yeah.
What is
Wow,
this is a big picture question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of challenges when we talk about different types of government and leadership, from decentralized government to top-down leadership. And certainly having a leadership that is supportive of community adaptation, that recognizes climate change in the first place is happening would be helpful. If you've got a leadership of people in authority or decision makers who do not see climate change or global warming as a problem, then they're less likely to support communities' adaptation strategies. So even though I've been talking about kind of what the community has kind of from a bottom up, you really have to be met from the top down as well in terms of the organizational structure or the leadership structure or the government structure. And so it has to be kind of a blending from the top and the bottom to support broad-based change and long-lasting change. Okay. And so what is the primary role of a Z generation? Oh my gosh, your energy and your knowledge. And I think coming and being in a world with so much more knowledge and awareness of the interconnectedness of systems that we just didn't have 30 or 50 years ago or 2 or 3 generations ago across larger systems. Okay. And so I think having that knowledge, you're coming into a world that you know so much more. And I think there are opportunities to be that agent of change and to be a part of that group that says we value agriculture, we value our communities. How can we keep them going? How can we value that local knowledge in traditional ways, at the same time recognizing that we have these global issues that aren't going to go away? Climate change is not going to go away. How can we blend that knowledge with that local knowledge and say, this is how we can do this better going forward?
Okay, and then the last one. Okay. This from Rwanda.
This is a little bit about what I was just talking about in terms of our leadership.
Yeah, leadership.
You know, if we don't have leaders that recognize the realities of climate change, they're less likely to advocate for doing something on a larger scale, which is, you know, this question, a very good question. And I wish I had that particular answer about how to get our global leaders together and to play nice and to figure this out. I think that is one of our greatest challenges, which is one that I think needs to be continually addressed. But at the same time, I feel that there is the work that can be done at that local level. And so while the politicians are doing their thing and trying to come up with those global policies, in the meantime, we've got the great science of soils and wind and air that are coming out that we can still apply. We don't have to wait. And I think the power of the local level of creating those changes is really important. And I think once we can get Gen Z or local community members mobilized and engaged, I think politicians have to listen. Our leaders will have to listen eventually, right? Alternatively, it's to also then not only do good science and be aware, but be leaders in the community yourselves, and to be those leaders and those agents of change at the local level where decisions are being made. And, you know, when I was younger, a while ago, long while ago, I was socialized when I was learning my science that science and policy are separate. You know, that if we just do good science, policymakers will listen. But now we know that they don't always listen. Okay?
Yes.
Or they have other competing interests that help shape how they hear things or what they want to hear. So I think scientists need to think about also being advocates to some extent as well, recognizing your science has to support your advocacy, but to be able to bridge that in ways that I don't think I was encouraged to do as a young person, as a young scientist.
Okay.
Yeah. So Prof. Laurie, so we need, here leader is very important, right? Leader or a role model to support the group dynamics and adaptations. So I think, is it the most important part of society? I mean, the role model, or it's just come up with only with interconnections among them, among the government, the society, the leader itself, and also the community.
They're absolutely interconnected. And you can't have long-term change without recognizing that interconnectedness. Because if you have a policy being made, but you don't have it being implemented on the ground locally because people don't support it, then it's not going to be sustainable. So I think if you want to have long-term sustainable change and adoption of new technologies and new practices, we really have to look at this as an integrated system of human and ecological interests.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. The question, all questions from attendance link already done, and then we have some question from chat box. Okay, I will copy to this PowerPoint. Wait. It is for Prof. In, right?
Oh, I think it's too small. Yes.
Wait.
We cannot read it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Stop. Okay. Question for Handayani, madam. Any climate smart agriculture practical experience in Indonesia and USA? This is from Roy Durlev. Okay.
Yes, thank you for a wonderful question. Yes, of course. Well, mostly my experience for working with CSA in Indonesia is in Sumatra and Java Islands. And in USA, I start working on CSA actually since 1989, even though it's not very common yet, but all the indicators that I use is applied to the soil health, carbon sequestration, and how to reduce the CO2 evolution and also the nitrous oxide, nitrogen efficiency. So mostly when we talk about climate smart agriculture, the indicators are nitrogen cycle and carbon cycling usually. So I have been working for that cyclings in USA mostly, so more scientific. But in Indonesia, I try to be like working together with the community. So just like Professor Cramer said that, in Indonesia, it's very hard if we just working, like science and science. So we have to be with people. And and so while we do that, I did that. I educate them, but informal education, of course, with like discussion forum, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. There's the last question from chat box. Wait. Okay, this from Ryan from Philippines also. What are the fundamental approaches that we can take that encourage the farmers in the community to engage in climate smart agriculture practices? Because there are some local farmers who will refuse to adapt to these practices. Okay.
Okay, I will try to answer this one based on my experience. Based on my experience in Indonesia, because it's developing countries. Okay, so usually farmers like to see the real things. Okay, and one of the kind of limited knowledge based on my experience working with people or community is they do not know a good indicator, how good is good, how bad is bad. But scientists know, okay, but we cannot force them to bring the sample to the lab, which is very hard for them. They don't want to, they don't like numbers. So what we have to do as scientists, like I said before, we have to find a way to show them how is the improvement if we use that kind of practices. For example, if the soil color from reddish, orange, and become darker, and then, for example, the soil is very compact, or they have compaction, then we make sure the soil become more porous, by using different kind of practices, for say putting more compost, more organic matter, more biochar, and then after a while the soil become more porous. Okay, so this is getting better. And then also the soil kind of more moist, okay, instead of dry. So if the soil more moist, is better. And then we can see also the creek close to their farming system, farms, is it clean the water or not? So they need proof that they can see, just like you want to see me in the video, right? So you need proof that I'm the one that talking to you. So this is the same. So we have to educate them, but kind of informal education, and we have to give example, like, okay, not just talking, but action. Okay.
Okay.
That's my answer.
Thank you very much.
So actually the question is from Gerald Aguilar from Philippines. Yeah. Thank you, Gerald.
So this is question for Prof. Lori. Wait.
So actually, Prof, we call it as laggards usually. In Indonesia, yeah, laggards, farmers who always refuse to adopt and adapt the smart practice. Yeah.
Okay. Prof. Lori?
I think I can comment on that question as well as Ryan's question from the chat about perspectives of non-scientific community and how do you kind of engage them. I agree wholeheartedly with Dr. Ian because it's really, again, meeting people where they're at and what is their level of knowledge, what is their experience. And in the work that I tried to share today, it's really how do they define change themselves? So they might not talk about climate change, they might not use that language, but they could be interested in another dominant value, like how do I increase my yield? Okay. Or how do I get cleaner water? Or how do I reduce the water needed for my crops? They might not be using the language of climate smart agriculture, but they might be interested in some of the kind of the same underlying threads of what a climate smart agricultural farm would bring them. So you don't frame it as a climate smart agriculture, you frame it as something that matters, what matters to them, and how can you frame what you're doing to fit what their concerns are. Are they concerned about the sustainability of their soil? Are they concerned about using less water? Are they, what are they concerned about? And then you can bring in, oh, well, there's this technique of rotating or using cover crops or whatever the technique is you want to introduce, but it's getting at their needs, not what somebody as an expert would say is important that they should do. And so I think that's, again, listening to what matters to them and kind of bringing the story to what matters to them. What are their values about, and what are they hoping to gain from their agricultural practice? And I think the same thing can go a little bit towards Ryan's question about strategies for dealing with non-scientific community members. It's understanding who do they trust. When I was talking about kind of the social network analysis approach, sometimes people don't trust scientists. Sometimes they have tried something and it didn't work and they're like, oh, I'm never going to trust another scientist again. So it really is, if they trust seeing it for themselves or seeing the results, as was just mentioned, then find a way to show them how it can work, but also find out who they would trust. Would they say, well, I'm not going to try it, but if my neighbor tries it and I see results, then maybe I will do it. So maybe it's not working with them directly, but working with others in the village or in the community who are willing to experiment or to try and adapt. And then you use one of their friends' agricultural land as the study site. You say, okay, well, let's go, and instead of coming to the lab or coming to the research forest or the research agricultural area, let's go to your neighbor. They've tried this. Let's see how they're doing and what their experiences are. So it's identifying, again, what do they value, and then how can what you bring enhance what they value or fit with what their needs are. And then also thinking about who do they trust? How do they want to receive information, and how can you work with that that agent of trust? Because they may not trust an outsider. You know, I face that a lot when I'm working with local groups or indigenous groups, you know, that because I don't have that personal agricultural experience. I come from an urban area. And so sometimes it's like, oh, what do you know? You know, like, well, I do know a lot, even though I haven't experienced it a lot. So you tell me, what should I know? What do I need to know about how you engage with your landscape? And then maybe I can talk a little bit about what I can bring. And then you bring it together rather than, again, coming in with that outsider or that expert knowledge. And it's listening quite a bit. So hopefully I answered both Ryan's question and the other chat question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Prof. In please one.
Well, now there is a question from Jerick from NCHU. Is in the chat.
Yeah.
Do you think I should answer or not?
Okay,
It's
okay.
for me. Okay, so I will read the question. Okay, who knows will be benefits for others. Okay, so the question is, he said, my question is, what are the analysis? How can we directly measure the soil carbon sequestration in soil? For example, I want to determine the nitrogen gas and carbon gas emission. So, well, the simple way to measure carbon sequestration is to measure soil organic carbon, the first one. And second one is carbon content from the plants, okay? And then you can measure CO2 evolution using respiration methods or using other method that you can find. And then the nitrogen gas you can measure N2O. That is the simple way. So you can have data for both nitrogen and carbon cycling part. But the easy one is soil organic carbon. And also later on, you can measure soil organic matter in aggregates, particulate organic carbon, and then dissolved organic carbon. So there are a lot of literature or scientific journal about measuring soil carbon sequestration, and the method is you just choose which one that you like and kind of has publication on that, so you can compare with other scientists have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Prof.
Okay. Okay, I think the Q&A time is over.
Okay, yeah.
Lori, thank you very much for all questions from participants, and thank you very much for the answer from Prof. Lori and Prof. Handayani. I'll leave it to Ms. Fitri.
Yes,
please.
thank you, Pak Natshu. It seems that the participants have very high curiosity and they want to discuss more with Professor Iin and also Professor Lori. And to be honest, I also learned many things from these lectures. Thank you very much, Prof. Iin and Professor Lori. But we're so sorry that we should come to the end of today's sessions. And thank you for your active participations and attendance, our participants. And thank you very much for Professor Lori and also Professor Iin for coming and giving so many knowledge and new insights for us.